Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Have you ever noticed that at the beginning of a relationship, sex can be very hot? It's as if you can't get enough of each other. Frequently, over time, the hotness fades. And if kids, work, and other competitors for your attention enter the picture, the fade can accelerate, leaving you feeling discouraged and out of touch with the hotness that was once there. Is it possible to keep the fire burning? If so, how do you keep a relationship hot over the years? And should you care about this? In this episode, we have a world-renowned expert speaking to all of these questions and providing super practical tips. We'll even touch on the challenges COVID brings and how to attend to those. Dr. Pat Love, yes, that is her real name, is a relationship consultant, trainer, and workshop presenter, and she was a tenured professor at Texas A&M University. She also helps couples engage in hot monogamy, which is the title of one of her 6 books. Relationship expert Dr. Harville Hendricks has said of Pat's work that every couple wanting to deepen or save their relationship should read it. So join Pat and me as we explore how to keep a relationship hot, especially during COVID. Dr. Patricia Love, welcome to Super Psyched. I will be calling you Pat during this interview, if that is okay.
Oh, I love that. Yes, please do.
Great. So let's first address the elephant in the room. Your legal name is Patricia Love, and that was not a confabulation.
Right. I didn't. Actually, the first book proposal I sent in, one of the publishers said, Dr. Love, she will have to change your name. It's incredible. Nobody will believe that. And I'm well, I was born with that name and I did earn the doctorate. So,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of David Eagleman's work, who wrote a book called Incognito. He did a meta study where people with the same first letter of their first name often end up marrying, and people named Dennis often become dentists more often than statistically probable. So I find myself wondering if there were unconscious forces kind of driving you into the love zone.
Yeah. I know people ask me that all the time. If that were true, it would be so deeply buried.
It hasn't come out yet.
No, but it just, I often feel like I was a late bloomer, because when I applied for my very first job, which was a university professor job, that was my first real paying job, I only had one word under previous work experience, and it was homemaker. So that I don't know. It's just, I followed my interest, and that's what I've always done. Yeah.
Oh, that's just brilliant. Well, from Joseph Campbell's mouth to your ears, you followed your bliss and you found it and you landed it. You've also written extensively about keeping it hot in long-term monogamous relationships. And I can only imagine you think this is an important thing, in which case I would agree with you. I would love to hear in your words, what's important about keeping it hot in monogamy?
Yeah, I think 3 things. One is you have to understand yourself. You have to understand your partner, and you have to understand what makes relationships work. Mm-hmm. And I'll say just honestly, because if anybody's read the book Hot Monogamy, it's written on just about every page. Mm-hmm. A part of my motivation for writing the book was to understand myself.
Yes.
Because it has never been easy for me in relationship. It's easier now than it's ever been. And I often say I've confessed to everything I regret in the books, throughout my life. So it's not a secret. But sexuality was, it started off so exciting, and then it's almost like it would disappear. And where did it go? I knew it was here. And is there something wrong with me? Is it something wrong with my partner? Is it something wrong with my relationship? And how do you get it back? And those were personal questions. So it was, and my clients, of course, were bringing me those issues. And as you know, I love research. And so I wanted to understand it better and then to relay that to other people.
I love how elegant you've said that. Understand self, partner, and what makes relationships work. And I'm just remembering in 2016, I saw you present in front of a group of well over 1,000 licensed professionals, and you were just so elegant in your design. You were so funny, and you gave so many take homes that were immediately usable. And that's part of what drove me to ask you to be on the podcast. And just this is evidence of that. Understand yourself, partner, and what makes relationships work. You said that as if you were just taking a breath of air, but even to me, somebody who's studied relationships, I've not quite broken it down so elegantly. I love that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. In fact, I think if there's one gift that I have, I'm able to digest very complicated, detailed information and put it in a sound bite. And the reason why I like sound bites is it's easy for me to remember.
Yes, that's a good one. Repetition. Repetition is the mother of mastery.
Yes, exactly. And if it gets too long, I can't remember it, and my client certainly can't remember it. So I do like trying to make it very portable and practical, and because I want people. I love that question that Scott Miller in his research said. If you left here thinking, "Wow, that time with that therapist was worth the time, money, and effort, what would be different?" And literally, if we had a video camera, we could see something different. So I always want to give my clients those experiences and some take homes. And that's what I strive to do in the books that I write.
Yeah, and you do it so well, including the other books, which I've been exposed to, and the videos that are available on YouTube of you speaking about how to keep relationships going well. I'm just wondering, there's some studies that indicate that humans are not necessarily meant to be monogamous for life. And yet here you are tackling this. I'm wondering both about, just if we could go even more into why this is an important thing. What compelled you to sink so many hours into writing a book about hot monogamy? What's so important about keeping it hot over the long term?
Well, people want passion. I mean, that's what attracts us in the beginning. I often say falling in love is easy. We did it as adolescents. How hard could it be?
Right.
But staying in love takes information, skills, knowledge. You have to understand the stages of love. Again, going back to understand yourself, understand your partner, what makes relationships work. So you do need information, skills, and knowledge to get past that what I call the post-rapture stage. But you're right. I mean, in our life, in our history, evolutionary history, what people practice is serial monogamy, right. And that's one form. But monogamy, as you know, became a practical choice for offspring, for property, et cetera, but mainly to the modern day rationale for monogamy is safety. Mm. And yet this is really a two-edged sword. Here's how I like to explain. I've talked about hot monogamy so much over the years, and when you talk about something, it gets more simple and simple, and people ask me wonderful questions, and it often brings out more information I didn't even know I had. But I like to think about every one of us on a continuum. And let's say on one end of the continuum is what I call the sexy body, and on the other end, I call it the sexy brain. And half the population will relate more to the sexy brain, and about half, and that's not, by the way, like all women or all men. It's not a male-female thing. We're on this continuum, and then the sexy body person will experience life very simply. And there's not a direct correlation, but it's a pretty high correlation with how easy monogamy is. I often say some of us have been inoculated with a monogamy needle. You're nice to me in the elevator, I'm in love, and I'm thinking about you for the next, several months.
Yeah.
So that's on one end of a continuum. But then for others, it has to be a conscious choice because that's not your inclination. And I love the idea of putting us somewhere on continuums because that helps me understand myself, understand my partner, and then I get to ask the question, okay, what is best for the relationship? Because you and I both know not every happy, stable couple is practicing monogamy.
Right.
It probably said, what's best for me, what's best for you, what's best for our relationship. Monogamy is not best for our relationship. So even though I wrote the book and put that in the title, I say, this is not saying everybody needs to use this model, but for those of you who do want to choose the model, here's what research says, here's what couples say, here's what therapists say, because that was part of our research. We interviewed 1,500 couples and couples therapists.
Oh my goodness.
Kept going back and forth saying, well, what constitutes passion? And it's really interesting what they told us over time is that it sort of clustered around this sexy body, sexy brain, because half the population, have to feel connected, close, supported, loved, relaxed, and have their stress lowered. That's the sexy brain person. Mm-hmm. Desire. They can want to have sex. They can be attracted to their partner. They can be totally in love with their partner, but they have to have those preconditions to feel desire. Well, the other person on the other end, that sexy body person, you walk around with that throbbing sexual desire. And the longer they go without sex, the more the psychological, emotional, physical tension builds up. By the way, I had no idea about this until I started these interviews because for me, this more sexy brain person, I don't walk around with that body drum, sexual drum beating and throbbing in my body on a daily basis. And the tension, doesn't build up. Yeah. And they say the sexy body person has sex when the tension builds up. Sexy brain person has sex when the guilt builds up because you go, oh, we haven't had sex,
we got to correct for that.
Exactly, because ultimately it's not just what's best for me, what's best for you. It's what's best for our relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's a question I just throw out to my couples, is knowing your relationship, knowing your needs, knowing your partner, what's best for your relationship. That's a different paradigm. That's a different way of thinking.
Sure.
Because again, and it allows for the differences between and among individuals. That was a long answer. I'm not even sure.
It's a wonderful answer. And I'm wondering, what are the gifts on the other side of keeping it hot? What does the relationship get, and what do the individuals within it get?
Yeah. Well, let me just tell you what sexy brain people often say. They say, once I get into sex, I love it. And by the way, it's anybody's race to orgasm. Once the sexy brain person gets excited and the desire kicks in, honey, no holds barred.
Yeah.
So that's a real benefit about being proactive. This is why when couples say, well, give us some advice, I don't give advice unless couples ask, but if they say, give us some advice about, making love, having sex, whatever, and whatever terms they use. And I say, well, my best advice is when one person wants sex, the answer is always yes. That's my best advice.
Sure.
Now, if you and I are in a relationship, you might say when, and I might say how, because I might, want to pleasure you, you pleasure me, we pleasure each other. I mean, there are a lot of different ways we do this. And actually, this piece of information almost didn't make it in the book because I just thought, well, it's just so basic. But the couples taught me different because I often say, well, there are 4 categories of sex. If you whatever you would, one is just making love.
Sure.
Whatever you do. And this is what some people call it married sex or maintenance sex, but this is where couples just find something 2 or 3 maybe techniques or positions or activities or foreplay. They find what works for them and they do it, as a matter of pleasing one another, meeting their needs and the needs of their relationship. So making love is sort of like you make love happen,
Sure.
And then there can be the quickie.
Right.
Now I have to tell you, the biggest pushback I got from the quickie was from men. And men would say to me, yes, but I don't want to have pleasure, if my partner doesn't have pleasure. And I say, if I want an orgasm, I'll let you know. I know, because I often say each person should be responsible for his or her own orgasm. Because me, if I want to pleasure you and get pleasure from that, that's an option. I'm not saying it's what we do all the time. That's why I like a menu, but a quickie is a great way to balance what we call desire discrepancy, which is for a long time was known as the most common sexual issue, problem, whatever. But that's normal to have a desire discrepancy. If you're with any other one person, you're going to have a discrepancy in the temperature in the room.
Yep. Exactly. We're not carbon copies.
Exactly. So the quickie is just a great way. And again, I can say, you say when, I say how, that's one way to do it. The third one is more like a romantic sexual encounter. And this, you can set the scene. It usually, for a lot of busy couples, it oftentimes takes an appointment, and people say, well, doesn't that feel, manipulated, or doesn't that feel too organized? And I say, but that's what the block of time is for.
Sure.
You block off the time so spontaneity can occur within that block of time. Because yes, maybe in the first 20 minutes you're talking about, did you pick up the uniform for baseball, and did you,
right.
So forth.
Right.
So that third category, it's nice to know it's on the menu, because romantic love really stays in your memory. I mean, those moments where you set the scene, or you have the lovely dinner, or you're in the hot tub, or you take a bath or a shower together, or you're outdoors under the star. I mean, whatever it has to be, for that romantic connection is extremely, extremely important. Then the fourth category I talk about is adventuresome sex. Mm-hmm. And this is where you push the envelope a little bit. And by the way, that the adventure can be mental, emotional, physical, technique-wise, so we get to decide what would be a little titillating or taking a risk or whatever it would be for one or both of us together. And so when I say, well, what is your best advice and why did you get interested in monogamy? I think I got interested in it because it was a challenge for me personally, not monogamy, but keeping it hot.
Yep.
Staying interested and being interesting.
Yes.
Because I wanted to be interesting.
Yes.
I didn't want to just be interested. I mean, I did want to be that. And I felt like I had to work a little harder at it. But let me tell you the formula for passion, because I think I hear people talking about an elegant design, and to me, this is just an elegant design.
I'm all ears.
If you think of this continuum between people who are more estrogen dominant, sexy brain, and the more testosterone dominant, sexy body.
Right.
The good thing about the sexy brain person is they have to have intimacy. Yep. They have to have connection and kindness and thoughtfulness and support. They have to have it, or no vasodilation occurs. It's not just you have to know. It is a physiological fact for them. So they're going to advocate for intimacy, those moments of where they go beyond words, where there are these, what I call magic moments, which is always my goal, one of my goals in therapy, those magic moments that just put chill bumps down your back. Everybody feels it in the room. So they're going to advocate for those times. And then the sexy body person is going to say, yes, but let's don't forget about the physical. Mm-hmm. Let's don't forget about the hot, raucous sex where we, go into wild abandon and trust each other at that level. So passion, P equals S2I, two sexual beings joined by intimacy. Because if you only have sex, and some people will say that's fine, you can have hot sex, maintenance sex, married sex, whatever, but you will never have passion without intimacy, where your souls connect, where your psyches connect. And if you only have intimacy without sex, you can be good friends, you can be best friends. And I say, if neither person wants sex, far be it from me to be advocating for that.
Right.
Just be careful that you don't leave a void.
Yes.
Because where there's a vacuum, where there's a void, you know what? Nature abhors a vacuum.
It does.
So you can be best friends, but you can also be best friends with friends.
Yep.
So I love that idea, and that came from the couples, by the way, and the couples therapist. When you reduce it down, it's, passion is a combination of two sexual beings joined by intimacy.
Sure.
So anyway,
This is fantastic. So several thoughts go through my head. Of course, the idea that our primary sex organ is not between our legs; it's between our ears, particularly for the brain, sexy brain type,
sexy brain,
but also for the sexy body type, I would think as well. And you're mentioning some of the benefits. One of the benefits that I recall you mentioning was that sex also acts as a healthy version of an amnesia provider to forget the unnecessary, and of course,
let me say that.
And go for it.
Yeah, but this is so good. No, let me tell you, because I was a biased researcher.
Sure.
I really, when I started researching, sex, there was a part of me that wanted to think only those lower down on the phylogenetic scale wanted sex that once you became self-actualized. I don't know. I had this fantasy. No. It's like it makes your bones healthier, your teeth healthier, your hair shiny, your skin shiny.
Yeah.
And what you're referring to is the biggest rush of oxytocin that we get is orgasm.
Right.
And oxytocin is, of course, that bonding chemical that makes us feel protective, more monogamous, and also move closer, want more, gives you a surge of pleasure. But what you're referring to, it's an amnesic. That after sex, you forget she didn't pay Visa or that he didn't call your mom or whatever. And so it wipes the slate clean. And I think that is there were so many benefits to sex.
Sure. It's over the moon.
Over the moon, And again, but you have to know what turns you on. You have to know your own. This is the part that was missing for me personally. I didn't understand why in the beginning it was so hot. And then where did it go?
Exactly.
I had it.
It just somehow escaped like a bubble.
And here's the other mistake I made is that for an early part of my life, I equated sex with love.
Yeah.
And you and I know
it's not the same.
People, they are not the same, and they're different skill sets. And also there are people who actually can absolutely enjoy having sex with someone they don't even like, let alone love.
That's right.
Or a stranger, or recreation sex, or it's like a tennis partner. You don't have to love someone to play a good game of tennis.
Right.
So there's so many benefits to it. So that was part of the rationale, and that made for a very interesting book.
Absolutely. I'm taken by so many of the things you're talking about, including the idea that having a very intimate relationship does not equate necessarily with having an erotic relationship, and that a differentiating factor between friendship and being in a romantic relationship, a loving couple, is the sexual component and the vacuum that can be created in its absence. I've seen the deleterious effects of that, and I'm sure you have too, when it's not present and there is a discrepancy in desire. I was wondering, these rules, so to speak, these scientific findings, I'll call them rather than rules, do they apply to solely heteronormative couples, or have you found that the LGBTQ plus populations have the same experiences?
Well, by the way, a lot of what we've learned about equity and passion in relationships has come from the gay community. They've been some of our best teachers. Now, statistically, if you look at that continuum of estrogen dominance and testosterone dominance, in estrogen dominance, that sexy brain side of the continuum, 2/3 of women and a third of men fall in that.
Yep.
So a gay couple, a lesbian couple, a trans couple. I mean, you could fall anywhere on that continuum. But even if we know this, 2 women together, 2 men together, 3 women, whatever, you're going to have differences. That's why I say understand yourself, understand your partner or partners,
Yep.
and understand what makes this relationship work and be more meaningful. So we've learned so much from the gay and lesbian relationships and trans relationships, because they've just opened our minds. I mean, we didn't even have peer relationships before we learned this. Pepper Schwartz in her research got a lot of her research from gay and lesbian couples. So when she wrote about equity and peer relationships and changing roles and having, flexible roles and fluid relationships. So fluid doesn't just apply to my gender. It can be the roles that we play and the way we manage sexual issues. So yes, we've learned so much, and we're continuing to learn. And that's the exciting part of being in this field, isn't it?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I have a fascinating case study about a guy who falls into that 1/3 category, kind of the sexy brain guy. He was experiencing ED for about 6 years. He was in his young 30s, very healthy, high testosterone, clearly identified as hetero. Could get it up the first night with a new partner, and then moving forward couldn't until he met his fiance. And he no longer, he told me he still had that last Viagra, but he hadn't used it in north of a decade. So there's something about that head-heart connection, even for guys who are kind of thought of in the movies as just being sex machines. It's not necessarily so.
Yes. Let me say a couple things about that, because you're reminding me, Adam, of so many men that have come up to me privately with tears in their eyes and talk about the embarrassment because they don't fit with the stereotype on the sexy body continuum, sexy brain. They're among the 1/3. And also, let me tell you one other thing, because we mentioned oxytocin, because this is sort of an ace in the hole activity. Skin on skin contact releases oxytocin.
Right.
But here's the thing that happens to many men, regardless of where they are, because even the man who is more estrogen dominant still relates more and identifies more and is more like the testosterone dominant male in many ways. But estrogen enhances the effects of oxytocin. Testosterone offsets the effects of oxytocin.
Oh,
and that means most men are touch deprived because they need 2/3 more touching to feel this bond. And then if you're more estrogen dominant. And when I say this, I've never had a man argue with me.
That's amazing.
And often they come up and they're so moved, and because we touch little girls more than we touch little boys, and oftentimes they say, well, if I touch him, he'll want sex. And I say, that may happen, but that doesn't mean he doesn't need affection. And that skin on skin contact is one of the most, talk about how do we meet in the middle if you're both, on different ends of the continuum. Skin on skin contact is so, so, so important. And especially for men, And people say, well, where should I touch him? And I say, well, first of all, very few people, unless you have a commitment. And again, this is one of the rationales for monogamy or commitment in whatever form you make it, is very few people have the privilege or the right to touch your face.
That's right.
And there are more nerve endings in the face than any other part of your body. There are some localized areas. Yes.
I'm thinking about,
Yes, but not in a restaurant.
You might as well name them really quickly.
Yes, yes.
So obviously the clitoris and the head of the penis, a little bit more.
Of course. Yes, a little bit more. But this is so personal and private. And I often say, when was the last time someone just took your face in their hands? You know, and I mean, it's such a, and those, we're talking nanoseconds. We're not talking, people say, well, I'm busy and I don't have time and the kids are home and we're homeschooling and we're doing, you know, but this says so much.
It does.
In such a short amount of time.
It does.
You know,
I remember this photograph of Lou Gehrig being touched by his wife on his face. And I thought, wow, now there's a loving couple. And it's so primal. We as babies had that experience. And suddenly we left the Garden of Eden when we were no longer babies. And then we went into this kind of devastating dead zone of no touch on the face. And men don't even know how deprived of it they are. So that's a great prescription on your part. I'm wondering, speaking of prescriptions, let's go back to discrepancy of desire, because it's such a big deal and none of us is a carbon copy and there has to be discrepancy. It's almost a given. What are some ways to bridge?
Well, first of all, I often say, if you can, this sounds very trite, but to celebrate it, because you're going to learn from each other. And remember, the formula is two sexual beings joined by intimacy. Now, you can both be on the same end of the continuum. And then you have to sort of go against type. Because if you only have sex and you don't have intimacy, that leaves a void also.
Sure.
And then that person at work who's compassionate and kind and sees your skill level and touches that part of you, you know, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, you know, he's listening to me. And that's like a whole new world. And people don't, we think affairs or relationships start by people falling into bed. And yes, it can happen, you know, or into the closet or the whatever, the workroom. But most relationships start with this. Someone notices you. They see your strengths. They understand you. I mean, so you can't have one without the other for a long period of time. A long period of time.
And what the listener couldn't see was that Pat was using her eyes and using a V sign saying that we need to be connected visually. And I'm guessing, I'm intuiting that we need to be attuned to each other emotionally.
Yes. And you know, statistically, more people, estrogen dominant individuals tend to eye gaze more, but that doesn't mean we can't learn depending on where you are on the continuum.
Right.
Looking in someone's eyes, but here's the key. You have to have soft eyes.
Soft eyes.
Soft eyes.
Not intense eyes.
You remember Gottman's research, female eye roll predicts contempt, which is one of the strongest predictors of divorce and separation. So it's not that hard eye, cut your eyes. It's soft eyes.
Soft.
Who doesn't love being looked at with soft eyes? I mean, if I get that to happen in session, I know that's a magic moment where you, and I stop everything and I shut up and I roll my chair back and I get out of the way, because those are moments, that soft eyes. I mean, when someone looks at you, soft eyes, and everybody knows what that means. I don't have to, they don't have to see me do it. You know that. Let me tell you, well, anyway.
Please, no, go for it. Come on, Pat.
But, you know, I have a girlfriend. It's such a great story.
Yep.
But she was her daddy's favorite.
Yeah.
He used to take her to New Orleans bar and sit her on the counter and feed her raw oysters. And I mean, she adored him and he adored her. And he was dying. And she went to his home in New Orleans to see him for what she thought might be the last time in his home. And she said, I walked in the front door and he was coming down the stairs and he looked at me. And she said, in that moment, I thought, no one will ever look at me like that. Just by walking in the door will I ever see anybody look at me and it will brighten their life the moment I walk in the door. And I love that story. Well, fast forward.
I love it too.
Isn't that a great story?
It's a great story.
At that grieving moment, fast forward about 4 years, her toddler grandson, she walks in the door and he looks at her with those eyes.
Amazing.
And that's what we want from our partners. We want them to look at us with wonder and curiosity. And, because what you were talking about, your client with the first night with somebody, the difference is novelty. Novelty wakes up the brain.
Yep.
And so, and it releases dopamine, so you'll pay attention to it long enough to see if it's a friend or a foe, right? So we're watching. So you can enrapture your partner just by looking at her, looking at him with those soft eyes. And again, it doesn't have to end up with sex. It doesn't have to, it can just be that curiosity and wonder. Because if you've ever had a partner who looked at you and they look through you, or I had a couple in my office, I remember, and they were in a really, really, really tough place, very tough place. And because I don't see couples in 1 hour blocks, I see them in chunks of time, often all day or 2 days or even 3 days. So this was a long session, but he finally broke. And he said to her, it was a heterosexual couple, and he said, I realize I haven't looked at you in a long, long time.
Oh my gosh.
And
what a moment.
And that vulnerability and the ownership is that was a moment. Everything got quiet, and he cried and she cried and I cried. I'm sure I did. My supervisees say, Dr. Love, can you cry if you're the therapist? And I said, yes, but you got to stop before the client because you can't be crying.
You can't make this about you.
You can't, or you have to pay your client.
Right, exactly. It's like, let's switch seats.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there are so many. This is what I learned when I did the research, because this is why I loved looking at it in a way under a microscope, because out of my own curiosity. But there are activities that create those magic moments that you can pass over if you don't know to look for them. That's because these moments can happen and they don't have to take a long, long period of time to keep that connection going.
So, Pat, I don't know if you're aware of it, but you've just given the audience two of the best tips I could ever imagine. And neither of them necessarily describe eroticism, touching the face and the soft eye gaze. And I'm thinking about a paragon of the soft eye gaze who came in perhaps a very bad form, but he did it better than anybody I've ever seen. And that would be Don Draper on Mad Men, portrayed by John Hamm. He was a philanderer. He could get, I mean, of course he was great looking, but it was his gaze. He knew how to do that better than anybody, in spite of the fact that he could not really, he could create a faux intimate moment through that. And I hope the listener's not taking an idea away that this would be a great way to be a better player. I'm hoping this will be applied to, like all technology, I'm hoping this will be applied to create more meaning and connection in people's lives. Because one of the things that, at least it's been my understanding and experience, is that kind of going from bed to bed often leaves the person feeling empty inside, as evidenced by Don Draper. Would that be consistent with your? Yes.
Because if you only have sex, you can have hot sex maintenance, but at some point you will feel like something's missing. Now, what people often do is they move on to novelty.
Right.
But what happens in the romantic love stage? Let's look at infatuation. because nature gives us this window of opportunity, this 3 to 6 months of intense feeling, depending on how many times you've gone through it, because the more you fall in love, the shorter it gets, So if you're waiting to feel that what you felt with your high school, sweetheart, and you've gone through this many, many times, it, may not happen. And also, this is a stage that was never intended to be extended. But what people do, they don't just have sex. In fact, many, many lovers will say it's not about the sex. They'll say, I feel as if I've always known you. One look and I feel like we're together. Time stands still with you. I start a sentence and you can finish it. They tell me, I've told you things I've never told anybody ever before. You're so easy to talk to. Just your touch is enough to set my skin on fire. These are the things that we say because they're real in that moment. I mean, and this is the nature of infatuation. So it's like we got a prototype. And so people think, well, I'll just do the revolving door. I'll find a partner, go through infatuation, hit post-rapture, change partners, find a partner, go through infatuation. And you can do that, by the way. You can do that. But to get past that post-rapture stage, you got to have skills. And those are the skills of attachment, of contact, of sensuality, not just sexuality, of talking and listening and communication and knowing one another. All of that comes to form that connection, which is more about secure attachment. And that's why commitment is important. That's why monogamy, even if it's serial, whatever you call it, because yes, it's exciting to have adventure, but if adventure means I don't know if you're bringing home a disease.
Right. That's not a great adventure.
And now there seem to be a lot of new diseases, right?
Sure.
So again, can I trust you with the vulnerable information I gave you during that time? Because betrayal isn't just about sex. It's about telling and giving information and sending you pictures of me, that nobody else was supposed to see. And that vulnerability that we feel is so natural when you're under the influence of infatuation, because you trust, don't you? You're just flooded with oxytocin, which makes us trust each other.
I'm unequivocal. Later, I can trust her, exactly. And I can say anything and send anything, and it will be secure in the safe. And then, of course, lo and behold, afterward,
the first argument, you get thrown back. I have a girlfriend that has this. She's actually written about her past, and she would tell everything, and then it would get thrown up, and I'd say, quit telling that.
Yes.
Because it would be used abusively. Wait until there's a commitment and you can trust and you build trust. If you want to tell it, then tell it. But in the beginning, there is this illusion that it'll always be this way, and you'll always be that safe person for me.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about the illusions, the misconceptions. The media doesn't do us any favors when it creates movies about hot new relationships. I hardly ever see somebody 20 years deep in a relationship in a hot sex scene. That just isn't shown in the movies. Another thing that you mentioned earlier was that people believe it should be spontaneous, as if we're still in college in the dorms and we can just have no time, doesn't matter. But of course, when we become parents and we are taking the kids to baseball practice during non-COVID times, we do need to actually put it in the book so that we can be quote spontaneous during that. In the first maybe 5 minutes may feel like kind of a cold start, but at minute 6 it starts getting hot again. I'm wondering if you could share some of the common misconceptions about keeping it hot.
I think one of the biggest ones is if you're on the sexy body end, you think anybody can do this on demand.
Right.
And if you're the sexy brain person, you're often thinking, well, all you think about is sex. You don't want me. You just want sex, So these two people get polarized. And so that's why I've come up with, I gotta understand me, but I've also got to understand you, but what our relationship needs, but this is something that couples resist, and I know they resist it because of time, but periodically, and whether it's once a month or 2 months or quarterly or whatever you can do that's realistic, or what your relationship really needs, you do have to block off that time so that spontaneity can occur, because you have to realize spontaneity, and it's important to both, any two people in a relationship, or four or more, whatever your relationship holds. Everybody loves spontaneity. For some people, it's that gaze or that touch or that compliment. Like I got a compliment today that was just so touching. One of my friends said, "Pat, you make everything more fun." I mean, that's going to carry me for a long, long time. Coming from your partner, just think. But a spontaneous comment of endearment can take you a long way. And just like spontaneously have sex on the washer and dryer or whatever,
like they do in the movies.
Yeah, it's just as important. So and this is where conversations are can really help, or just saying, "I love it when," or "it turns me on when." I often say, catch your partner in the act of doing something right, and like high school, give them partial credit. Anything they do that's moving in the right direction, let them know, reinforce that. We all love to succeed, especially in relationships. And it's best to hear what we're doing right, so then to do more of that and move in that direction. And this will help the spontaneity too, because I have couples all the time who say, I've never had in 40 years of clinical practice a couple come in and not have some area that say, "Okay, do you all want sex?" "Yeah, we want that." Well, what would it look like, and frequency and technique and style and all that? They want the same thing. The question is how to get there. Most couples want a robust relationship, and if they could have it, they would love to have an exciting sex life. Who wouldn't, right? But how do we get there is the big question. And so we got to help each other out. Know what you want, and then have a way of communicating what you want. I think it's in the book Hot Monogamy, about a couple who came up when one person wanted to have sex, they would light a candle. They had 2 candles in the bedroom. And then if the other person wanted to have, they would light their candle.
I love it.
And so you never have to talk about it or criticize each other. You just use an act, an action, and it set the scene, and they came up with their own way. And so I think this spontaneity, we all want it. Sometimes we want it with sensuality, skin on skin,
sure,
or compliments. It's going back to the love languages, Chapman's love languages. But it's whatever you want. Your partner probably wants some form of that. And again, like I say, if neither of you want sex and you're not having a problem, far be it for me to say that.
Sure.
But just be careful. And also, I actually had a couple come, and he said, "I'm not going to divorce you about this, but I don't want our sex life to die for lack of conversation or discussion." And I actually I remember a couple coming in, and she wanted to be a mom, but she did not want to be a wife.
Wow.
And that's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
And so this is why couples who are together longer, statistically, to get past that infatuation stage where sex and intimacy are no-brainers. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to plan it. It just happens. But you got to, be together long enough to see what does it look like when we don't have Mother Nature fueling our passion. Yeah.
It's such a, you're kind of alluding to a quote that I love, and that is that all wisdom comes from the accuracy of naming things. And I think that very often people have compunctions about speaking about sex. They use
Oh, yeah.
euphemisms like down there
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
talking about what
Yes.
they want.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you would have no compunctions speaking about what you wanted to order at a restaurant or for
Yes.
dinner. But when it comes to this important meal, they do have compunctions, and it's
Yeah.
not never said. How important is languaging?
Oh,
In
yeah. I'm glad you're asking that, because I started to answer this question and then I got off track. And so I'm glad you're asking it, because one line I've heard from clients is, I don't know what she really wants in detail. And if I ask, it'll take away from the magic
of course,
that you can't ask.
right?
And I say, of course you can ask. And you can say, give me a menu. Now, here's what I tell people, that if you're going to say what you want, give at least 3 options. Because if you just say one thing, it feels like an order or a demand,
Right.
or a manipulation. And a lot of people have a hair trigger around control. Let's just face it. But if you give an option, if you and I are partners and I say, I love it when you, and I give you this,
Oh,
and
that's
then
brilliant.
if you want to turn me on, here's what turns me on, and here's another thing that turns me on. That starts to give you some ideas. And then what I say is, try to make it PMS. Everyone can remember that acronym, PMS, positive, measurable, and specific. Once a week, if you just, come over and hold me and turn off all electronics and just let me lie in your arms, that would really melt my heart. When you come home, and you walk in the door, come find me first. Or before we go to sleep at night, kiss me passionately. There's a menu. So you're starting to get some ideas. And then what I say is, your job then is to either meet one of those requests or offer an alternative that I can agree on. Well, what if I did this? When I come in and the kids rush me and the dogs rush me, I say, let's go find mom, dad, whatever. And I give you a passionate kiss. What would that be like, So, and I say, yeah, that would really get it. And just think, by the way, I have a whole other lecture on partnering is the primary part of parenting. People say, well, we have kids and we're busy. Research, since we've been doing research in family therapy, always says acting out behavior in kids is more highly correlated with the spousal unit.
Yes.
And the parenting unit. So just think what you're giving your kids. It's not like, you're having sex in front of your kids. That's what I'm saying.
No.
You are being affectionate.
Yes.
You are being adoring. You are being romantic, and appropriately romantic. Because when you come in, you want to find her. You want to find him. You want the kids to see that. And you've got to have that modeling, because they look at adulthood and they say, okay, let me see. When you grow up, you work and you take care of kids. That doesn't look like fun to me. I don't think I want to grow up.
One of my favorite axioms is the axis around which your child's world spins is the quality of the relationship you share with your spouse.
Yes.
And
yes.
modeling that is so important. Children are like sponges. They feel the tension if it's not there. And I believe that having a sexy relationship can really add to it has a long half-life, and
yes.
it can add to the glue in the relationship itself. I love what you're doing. It's such a good prescription. And I'm so delighted that you have been one of the great voices in hot monogamy. I'm wondering, we're in the midst of COVID and people maybe sick of each other how do we attend to the challenges that COVID specifically presents in terms of keeping it hot?
Yeah, because half the population wants mystery and novelty and drama and privacy, and and that's what builds the tension. Well, the other half wants closeness and transparency and
Right.
contact. And these two people often find each other. But even if you're both on the same end of the continuum, let's face it, lockdown has been challenging. And so this is where, like you said, you had an elegant way of saying that, name it to tame it, but the wisdom of understanding each other, knowing what I want and need, knowing what you want and need, and knowing what the relationship needs becomes even more important, because here's the thing that we lost and are losing and still losing in lockdown and even in the pandemic is loss of habituation. And those habits, for many of us, were our primary coping strategies.
Sure.
They kept us calm. They kept us sane.
Yes.
They kept the novelty in our life. They were ways to exercise a joint passion. In fact, if you want to, people bond around fun. And people get sexually, when you have a passionate life and you couples share a joint passion, that can translate into sexual passion. Well, the pandemic has taken a lot of those passions away.
Sure.
You don't go out and go dancing. You don't go horseback riding. You don't go, working out together at the gym and see all these sexy bodies. I mean, so we have had to be real creative, number one, in creating the novelty, because our lives are monochrome now.
Right.
Not Technicolor. And also, during this time, we have to honor the introvert-extrovert differences.
Mm-hmm.
How much time, for some of us, our battery gets charged sexually and otherwise by time alone. And for others of us, it's time together. But there's a law of diminishing returns, isn't there?
Sure.
Because in lockdown, we're under the same roof. And let me just tell you a difference. Half the population believes if we're under the same roof, that counts as couple time. Well,
right.
The other half of the population thinks, oh, no.
Not even.
We've got to be communicating, sitting face to face, sharing a cup of tea, gazing at each other, touching each other. So all of these differences become heightened, not to mention, and we can't even have time to go in, just the extreme pressure of economics. Because you and I know money and sex. Is correlated. It's correlated, and it's 7 out of 10 couples say before the pandemic, we're under financial stress already.
Absolutely.
And stress is an anti-erotic experience for half the population, the sexy brain person. Now, here's the other thing. The other half of the population, when tension builds up, they want sex more. The other half of the population, when tension and stress builds up, they want sex less.
Yes.
And so you're going to have to, somehow manage those differences. And first thing is, you don't take it personally. This is the body I came with. How I play it is up to me. This is what I found hopeful as a sexy brain person. I thought, because I always knew I was a sexual being, I just didn't understand how you can have it 1 month and have it go away, and not have somebody to blame. I didn't realize that, I needed this intimate contact. I didn't know how to negotiate for it. I didn't even know I needed it, didn't know the void was there. And so these are the things that, one thing that lockdown gives us is the time together to explore these differences and to get to know each other better, and maybe push that envelope a little bit sexually, because we do have more time. I mean, life has slowed down for many of us. For some of us, yes, our work, probably my work, your work, has just grown exponentially during the pandemic. But the contact and the time under the same roof has expanded 100 times probably, because I'm the type that would be going somewhere, and getting inspired. But and let me just say one thing, because people often ask me this question. This would be a good thing to end on. Dr. Love, what do you mean when you say a joint passion? What can we do that could, put energy back in our relationship that wouldn't be so threatening. And so I'm going to ask you this question, Adam.
Sure.
And personally, I want you to think of an activity that meets these 5 criteria.
I'm all ears.
Okay, just you personally. Okay.
Sure.
Number 1 is anticipation. When you wake up in the morning and you know you're going to do this that day, you get excited.
Sure.
So the first criteria is you anticipate it. Number 2, it's challenging.
Yep.
That it either challenges you physically or emotionally or psychologically or intellectually. Okay, so it's a challenge. Number 3, it's energizing. That when you do it, you either get, spiritually or emotionally energized or maybe physically jazzed or whatever. It's energizing.
Yep.
Okay. And number 4, that it's absorbing. That when you're doing it, you lose track of time. You look up and you say, where did our hour go, Adam?
Yep.
It's gone because it's absorbing. You lose track of time. And number 5, it's congruent with who you are. When you're doing this, you go, yes, this is exactly what I want to be doing.
So those may be the best measures I've ever heard. And I've studied this type of thing a lot. Anticipation, challenging, energizing, absorbing, and congruent with who I am. And my 2 answers actually are what's happening right here, right now. Doing this podcast is one of those things. And the other is I'm so blessed to be a psychotherapist, a psychologist. I have a profound curiosity and love of learning. So getting to be a psychologist and working with people, I have this all the time. Every day I wake up really stoked. So those would meet all 5.
All right. So here's what I want to leave couples with. While you're in lockdown or after lockdown, whatever, here's the thing that we can do. The 2 of you together have to come up with a joint activity that meets all 5 criteria.
Wow. And what that will do is
it will put passion back in your life. I
agree.
Isn't that a simple?
Isn't that brilliant?
It's just a simple, a simple way to re-energize that's not threatening to anybody.
Pat, I am so delighted to be with you. You met all 5 criteria for me today. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope it was at least somewhat similar on your end.
It was very, very enjoyable. And once this whole thing is finished, you and I'll do it again.
Oh, this will be great.
And thank you for making it simple for me. Thank you. And you're a great interviewer. And I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you for what you do for so many people. This is so important.
Oh, thank you so much. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.